Good morning, Northwest Indiana, and welcome to Chamber Chat, Munster Chamber of Commerce. We come on here monthly, talk about all the great things, programs, and some wonderful people that we have in the community leaders. I'm Damian Rico. I'll be your host today. I am the marketing director at Hospice of the Calumet area, and it is my honor and privilege to come on and fill in for Katie Sanito, who is our chairman. And today I have a great guest, one of my closest pals out in the veteran world. Bob Carnegie and I known each other for a very, very long time. I met him through a mutual friend, Jim Chancellor, and my father, Peter Rico, who is very active in the DAV. And Bob, you're the commander of the DAV, right?
That's correct. I have been for this past year.
Okay, so off and on, chairman or commander for a long time with the
Yes.
DAV, and you guys have done a lot of excellent work. Why don't you talk about the DAV walk you guys just had a couple months ago? That was
Right.
pretty awesome.
We partnered with the St. John Township,
Okay.
Kathy LaRue, and she liked what we were doing because they don't have a DAV out in that area,
Okay.
and so she uses her experience with us. And anybody that comes into her office looking for help of certain type, and maybe they need the help of a DAV, we fill in for that.
Okay.
And so we partner with that. And so she's always very gracious with her time and effort to try to help us as we have a walk like you're familiar with that
Yes.
we've been having for years. And so the town of Cherville has gotten on board with that, and we probably had about 150 walkers and raised a lot of money that they donated back into our organization to help veterans in the community.
Yes, the DAV walk has been a very, very big part of our lives ever since I was a young man. My dad would encourage our family to walk as part of the group, and our family and our friends were always very supportive. And this year we came out to the DAV walk as well. Bob, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the DAV, what it stands for, and who it helps? Because there's a lot of people out there that might not know.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't know. The DAV stands for Disabled American Veterans. And so for people who've served in the service, when they get out, they think they're out.
Right.
And really they're not out, because there's things that can happen to them while they're in service can have an effect on the rest of their life. And, we all know about people that may come home from the Middle East and they might have PTSD or something like that, that they're having issues with what they experienced while they were deployed. And so we can't forget about those guys.
Right.
Sometimes, I was in the service, but I had very calm duty. I was in Vietnam, very calm duty.
What years were you there, Bob?
I got there in 1968, and I stayed until March of '69. I stayed the extra 33 days. So
Now, what did you do there? What was your...
I was trained to be a chaplain's assistant.
Okay.
And when I got in country, they changed your orders. So I was carrying orders on the way, leaving the United States for the 9th Infantry.
Okay.
I knew I didn't want to be in the 9th Infantry. I said, whoa, those guys are fighting every day. They're in
Yeah.
the newspaper every day in Vietnam. And so when you get there, there's like a human resource department, and they look at where they need people that are just coming in. And so they figured out another place to put me, and they put me in a signal group.
Okay.
And I was based just outside of Saigon. But we had groups that were in 5 different cities all over the country, and we installed telephone switches, just like you'd see here, so that we could communicate as easily with the United States as it was capable at that particular time.
Okay.
And I didn't know it. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, what I was supposed to be doing. But
Very important job.
it was a very important job because they wanted those commanders in Vietnam, in the rough spots, to be able to pick up a phone and call somebody and tell them exactly what was happening that day in that space. And so our unit enabled that. Well, not that I had anything to do with it, but enabling that. And the funny story, Damien, you're all living one barracks, another barracks, and that kind of stuff. You get to know different people doing different things. And one of the guys I got to know said, "Hey, you want to call home?" I go, "What are you talking about? Well, here we are in a barracks that had, 10 bunk beds and raining outside or
Right.
110 degrees outside, whatever it might be." He says, "Yeah, I'm an operator in the comm center." He says, "I'm going to work tonight. Just get by the phone when where we were saying." I was in the aid station, half of it, and half of it was a barracks. And he said, "Just go into the aid station tonight after 10 o'clock and ask for me, and they'll put you through." So I called. I got in there, and the guy's name was Noyes. His last name was Noyes. So Noyes, I said, "Hey, it's Carnegie." He said, "Okay." So he set up the connections. I'm sitting just in a chair in the middle of Vietnam, just like this. And he said, "Okay, hang on, I'm going to do some stuff." And all of a sudden, the operator said, "Hello." I said, "Hello." She says, "Oh, this is Hawaii. I'm going to take this call and transfer it to the States." And I hear click, 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 click. Another operator. She says, "Who are you calling?" I said, and I gave my parents' phone number. Boom, my dad answers the phone.
Wow.
I'm sitting there. He says, "Hello." I said, "Hey, Dad, how you doing?" He said, "Bob?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where are you?" "You're in a hospital." "I know you're in a hospital." And he wouldn't believe me.
Wow.
I said, "I'm sitting in my hooch. I got a telephone in my hand just like you do."
Wow.
And he said, "No, you don't. You're in a hospital. I know you're in a hospital. Where are you at?" And I said, "I'm not. Let me talk to Mother." So he put my mom on the phone, and she understood.
Okay.
He didn't. He till the day he died, I think he still thought I was in a hospital, which I wasn't. But that's the kind of communications we had, and people didn't realize that we were that far ahead of our enemy, who was using bungee sticks and digging holes in the ground and bungee sticks to get us. And we've got this line of communication. What's wrong with this? Let's use this
Yes.
advantage we have. And we didn't, but
Well, and that was a tough time, Bob. You and I talked several times about it, and I think growing up with a father who was in Vietnam, growing up really, really early in my life, I didn't even know about Vietnam. He didn't talk about it. We didn't look at any of the medals, didn't show us anything, the newspaper clippings that my grandmother had kept until the Chicago. It was a parade.
yeah, it was Welcome Home.
It was a Desert Storm, and then they had all the other.
No, it was Welcome Home for Vietnam
Oh, it
veterans.
was Welcome Home for Vietnam
Yep.
veterans. Okay.
I know a little bit about
Okay.
starting out. Think of, where our chapter is in Hammond.
Yes.
Okay. We would gather members that were in that little niche in Illinois
Uh-huh.
on the east side underneath the Skyway.
Yes.
Those people would come to our meetings. In fact, we had a lot of guys from that area.
Okay.
Because there was a large group of people in that area whose children or kids were in Vietnam at the same time your dad and I were in Vietnam.
Okay.
And I mean a chunk. And there's Guadalupe, there's a big Catholic church there.
Yes. Are they Guadalupe?
Yep. And they lost about 14 or 15 guys
Wow.
from just that small church. They're doing some things now. They've had some monuments painted on the outside of their church, and they've fallen by the wayside. And there's a big project now starting out to get those images of, I think, 10 or 11 at least soldiers that died in Vietnam and get them fixed up so that they're visible again and recognizable again.
Yeah, because I just remember thousands of folks participating.
There were. I was working downtown Chicago at that time, and I knew by reading in the paper that was going to take place.
Okay.
I think it was a Friday, but I can't be sure. And so in my brain, I said, I'm going to work. I worked at down right on Michigan Avenue, and I wore my jungle fatigue jacket into the office. And when I walked in the front door, everybody said, "What's that?" Because nobody knew I was even in the Army.
Wow.
And I said, that's a jungle fatigue. Where'd you get that? Army Navy surplus? I said, no. It was handed to me by a sergeant. I said,
Wow.
I was in the Army. They said, you're kidding. They said, well, why do you have it today? I said, well, there's going to be a welcome home Vietnam veterans today. And right through downtown. I said, are you going? They said, are you going? I said, well, I was thinking about walking down to see what was going on. And my one friend grabbed me and he said, Carnegie, you're going if I have to carry you down there, because they were going to walk down LaSalle Street.
Right.
And so that kind of swayed me to go. I wasn't sure if I was going to go. It was just me. Nobody else in the office even had any idea. So at about 11:30, I walked down Michigan Avenue. Olive Park is just outside of Navy Pier. And that's where they said they were going to gather at Navy Pier and then out of Olive Park to walk down LaSalle Street. So I walked on there, and it was crowded. People were starting to fill in. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And so this walk started out. They had 200,000 Vietnam veterans crammed on Navy Pier and all around that area to walk in this parade.
Wow,
they had
incredible.
no idea they were going to have that many people. So I stood there and watched it start. And I just couldn't believe what I saw.
Yeah.
The first guys walking in the parade had no legs. And they had cardboard over covering their knuckles so they could walk with just their arms, no legs. That was the first two guys in the parade.
Yeah, that was a huge impact on us.
Right. Because as the first time people really saw the impact of war right here in front of me, the vehicle behind them was from Hines Hospital. That's not what we have today. Today we have Adam Benjamin, Jesse Brown, huge hospital downtown. This was Hines Hospital, which was in Hines, Illinois. It was a bus. Every guy on the bus was in a wheelchair. And that was the second part of piece of in the parade. And I stood there going, my eyes were bugging out, going, what am I seeing here?
Right.
I mean, I was shocked. And then more groups went by, and then finally a group by that said Indiana. And I said, do you mind if I walk with you? And they said, oh, come on, get in. So I put my little jacket on, and I walked. And we walked through the streets going up to Wacker Drive. And there were some people on the curbs and stuff like that. And we walked down west on Wacker Drive till we got to LaSalle. And we turned, and when I turned, you could see all the way down LaSalle till it dead ended about 6 or 8 blocks down. It was a sea of people throwing ticker tape, everything out of the window, and guys were walking.
Celebration.
It was unbelievable, and I'm in the middle, in the middle of it. I go, holy mackerel. And I'm sure your father and I went through very similar experience, because that day changed our lives. Because there you were surrounded by, as it turned out, a couple 100,000 guys at one time.
Yes.
That represented what we had been asked to do. And we were making a lot of noise, and people were cheering us from the curbs, and it was okay that day.
Right.
For the first time ever, it was okay to say I'd been to Vietnam.
Yeah, there was a lot of healing that happened at that parade.
Yep.
And I think not just for veterans, but for veteran families,
Yep.
for just the general public to understand
Right.
what you all have been through and what you have sacrificed. And I think even now, you see veterans and you do these veteran presentations, and a lot of people, a lot of the schools are honoring their veterans, but you really don't know. I mean, you celebrate them like holistically, but every soldier, every veteran has a story.
Yep.
And some are better than others. Some have seen worse than others.
Yep.
But ultimately, they have all sacrificed something for us.
Yes, absolutely. And, this is hard to explain, but in Vietnam, we were gone for a year.
Mm-hmm.
You went, a year later you came home. Some guys stayed a little longer. Some guys got hurt. Some guys got killed, came home earlier. But when you came home, you were done. Mm-hmm. And but there was one year in your life will never
Right.
be recovered, never be the same. I was lucky. I had a very safe position to be in. Your father, I know, wasn't in that kind of a situation.
Right.
But it didn't matter. For 12 months, we were frightened. We were frightened.
Yes.
And where I was very, very safe, but I could see every night when I had guard duty, I could see napalm being dropped 20 miles away. I was up one morning and my whole barracks started to shake, and they weren't well built, but this thing was shaking like that.
Yeah.
And I said, "What's that?" And these guys, I was pretty new. They said, "Oh, that's an earthquake."
Wow.
I said, "I didn't know they had earthquakes in Vietnam." Okay, so maybe 2-3 weeks later, the building started to shake like that, and some guy who was relatively new said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, it's an earthquake. Don't worry." And everybody in the room started laughing. I said, what's so funny? They said, "You dummy, that's not an earthquake. That's B-52 bombing run 30 miles away."
Wow.
That's what that was.
30 miles away.
Yes. And they'd just brrr with bombs and just shake the mountains and the ground and everything. And so for me, that was shocking.
Yeah.
That I was that close to war, that my whole building was shaking, and it was our stuff we were dropping on somebody else.
Bob, what do you think was the most painful part for you in Vietnam? I mean, I know there's a lot of things that you see, but overall, what was the most challenging and toughest thing for you?
When I first got there, I was from here. Basketball season. It was March. And I met another guy. Didn't know him. He was from Marion, Indiana. And every time he'd get a letter, he'd tell me who was winning the basketball tournament. When I'd get a letter, I'd tell him who's winning the basketball tournament. And before the tournament was over, he got transferred to another place that we managed, and he was an MP. So he was up on top of a mountain, and they had the antennas are almost as big as an outdoor movie theater. And they were long. I don't even know what they were transmitting. It was different than I knew. But so he was the MP up there to watch this, and there wasn't any action. It was where the VC didn't know anything about what we were doing, didn't care. They had their hands full down here. They pretty much left us alone, but we had to have protection there. And after he's gone about 3 weeks, one of the Vietnamese people told me he was dead. And I couldn't believe it. And I found out later that he died because of friendly fire. And that was guys probably drinking or something in a safe place, in a bunker. And somebody took the pin out of a grenade, kept the clip in with their hand, and they were passing it around. I don't know what happened, but I assume somebody probably dropped it. The pin popped off, and my friend dove on it and ate that grenade. And it was at night. And they couldn't get a medevac in because it was foggy. And so he suffered all night, and he died in the morning. And I didn't know much about that. And I'm going to mention a name here. When I was home, I ran into a doings at American Legion 369 in East Chicago, and I was invited to attend that. And I went, and Tom Clark had it set up there to show what he had been researching and all the people who had died in Indiana, and a write-up on how they died and everything else. And so I had never met Tom before. And when he had a few minutes, I said, "Hey, Tom, could you look up this, my friend?" He said, "Sure, we'll find him." I said he lived in Marion, Indiana, and I gave him his name. And he pulled it up on the screen, and He said, Bob, I've never seen one like this. There's nothing here. His name's there, but there's nothing there. Nothing description of his unit, nothing about how he passed, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that's the only one I've ever seen like this. I said, that doesn't surprise me. And so I told him what I knew and that it was friendly fire and that stuff. And he said, well, we get our information by calling the family. And when they called this family, they didn't want to talk about it.
Oh.
And that's why they didn't have any information, because they knew nothing. They didn't know what I knew.
Right.
And I didn't know much. But the family was brokenhearted forever, knowing that he should have been home. He should have, and yet it wasn't.
Yeah. And Bob, there's a lot of stories like that. And I remember the first time taking my dad to Washington, D.C., because I was on a media and public affairs committee, and we'd meet 4 times a year out in Washington, D.C. And one time I told my mom, I said, hey, Mom, you and Dad should come with me on one of these trips, and then you could take him to the wall. And she's like, that's a great idea. She goes, but why don't you take him to the wall? And I thought to myself, well, that's going to be hard. You know, that's a very emotional, I knew that was going to be a very emotional time. And she's like, I think you and him should do it. And I remember Bob taking him, and it's probably one of the most touching things ever in my life. And my father and I were really close, but I didn't think I was brave enough to do that. And the first time I took him there, and I just saw him break down and look at the wall, and it seemed like we were there for hours. I felt like he touched every single name on that wall. And after the day was over, you know, it was very emotional for us. And I remember having this conversation. I said, Dad, what's the hardest and challenging part for you? He says, every day I thank God that I made it, but I always think about these guys who didn't.
Right.
And he goes, and that's going to be something that touches my soul all the time. And I never forgot that, because, here, instead of saying, thank God I made it, you worry about the ones who didn't and their
Sure.
families and how
Sure.
they're doing. And I know a lot of veterans feel that way. And I know
Yep.
Vietnam was a very tough time for folks. And coming home was even tougher, because, we were living in a world with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of confusion and chaos. And,
Right.
didn't fare well for you guys. But welcome home.
Thank you. And I was very fortunate in my career and traveled quite a bit. Spent time in Washington, D.C., and I got to take myself to the wall by myself one night. That was very hard. Because it was just me, just me. 58,000 names. And the week I came home from Vietnam, a guy from Lansing died.
Wow.
And he slept that far from me in basic training. 5 feet. He was married, just got married as he came into the service. We even snuck home on one weekend so he could see his wife, who he hadn't been married to very long when we got in.
Right.
When I found out he died, like the week I came home, we weren't together in Vietnam at all, just in basic training. But that's the thing, the 2 guys that are on the wall that I know that well. And I live with the fact I lived and they didn't.
Yeah.
What makes me different? What makes me... I can't tell that story because I don't know. But when I go there and see that, I can think of... There may be 58,000 names. I think of 2.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I was the one that made it through. So I feel obligated to have this conversation with people or whatever, because I can't let their spirits die.
Right.
And so a little over a year ago, I got on the honor flight. And I'd been divorced for 40 years, and I took my new wife with me, and she was my escort. And we did all the things that they take you around. But we spent the most amount of time at the wall. Mm-hmm. Sitting on the ground next to those names. Because I feel part of them. And that's the hardest thing for me, to live with the fact I get to do all these wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things.
Right.
And they died at 19.
Well, you're still preserving their honor and their legacy, Bob. I mean, all the work that you do through the DAV and the DAV walks, and the sponsorships and the education that you dedicate yourself to, you know, that keeps their spirit, that keeps their legacy alive.
I
And
know.
I know that has to drive you,
Yep,
right?
and that's right, and that's why at 70 years old I'm still leading them,
Yes. Yeah.
and I can't imagine not doing that.
Right. Right. Right.
So it's an act of love. There is no doubt about it for me, and I never followed up with those families or anything like that. I knew that they had figured out a way to live with their loss, however, and me walking into that life and explaining how I knew their son, I don't know, I can handle that,
Right.
And so I just know that I have to tell people what we left behind,
Right.
and how fortunate we are, when we have a DAV meeting, and I look and sometimes there's 100, 150 guys in the room, and I go, these are the lucky ones.
Yeah.
These are the lucky ones, and it's up to us to tell our story.
It is. It is up to you guys to tell that story, and it's a very important story to
Yep.
tell.
Yep.
Bob, we last year for the Munster Chamber, we did these banners through the whole town of Munster. We had all kind of businesses promote for the 100 years, and it was very successful. But this year we talked about, how do we have impact? How can we keep that ball of fire rolling? And we wanted to support our hometown heroes. And actually, we don't even call it hometown. It could be just honoring
Sure.
heroes. So what we're doing this year is we're going to be recognizing veterans. Veterans, whether they're friends, family,
Sure.
and I know my dad is going to have a banner up there. I'm going to proudly purchase one. So if anybody wants to learn more about it, it's 219-836-5549 is the Munster Chamber office. So you buy this banner, and I want to say it's $375, but 100 of that goes to a veterans organization. So you can set that up with our Karen Mashur, who's our executive director. But it's very important to not only to celebrate these heroes, but also to support organizations like the DAV and all the chapters and the VFWs out there, because they're the ones preserving these legacies, right? They're the ones remembering folks. These are the ones providing resources for folks. And I think that's very, very important.
It's very important.
Because, like I said, we didn't really handle the situation when you guys came home very well as a country. And this is a great way to make an atonement. We talk about this at the Hospice of the Calumet area. A lot of our patients, which 1 in 4 is a veteran, are now of the Vietnam era. So this is a great way to make amends and to celebrate those folks and to cherish and admire them and tell them that we appreciate them.
Yeah, but I think that it's a very important cause, because who's going to do it
Right.
when we're gone?
Yes.
And anytime I can talk about it, you saw this morning when we stopped and had a juice and toast.
Yep.
Guy walked up to me because of the hat I had on.
Right.
He knew immediately where I'd been. He didn't have a hat like that on, but I knew immediately when he asked his first question where he'd been.
Right. And so, that's funny, Bob, because I got a little confused this morning. We showed up here at 8:30. I thought our
Yep.
meeting our show time was 8:30, but I got confused, I guess, with our hospice time. That's 8:30. And so we spent an hour getting to know each other better,
Sure.
talking about things. We met a veteran at breakfast.
Yep.
And, I think things happen for a reason. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's in this day and age when it's just everybody's so busy, it's great to just stop and have that time.
Yep.
And so today was my time with you, Bob.
Yep.
And I appreciate it. I always appreciate the time I spend with you, because we talk about a lot of things and we solve a lot of the world's problems, right? In our minds, at least, right?
Absolutely.
But I just want to I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your service and all the sacrifice that you do for us. How do we find out more about the DAV? If somebody's out there wanting to join the DAV or to learn about DAV and your events, how
Sure.
do they learn about that?
Well, the DAV is kind of a mystical group.
Okay.
We don't have a building.
Okay.
Most of the DAVs don't have a building. And so we borrow somebody's building. We borrow VFW 802 that's in Hammond across from
Okay.
Harrison Park. We meet there once a month. And there's a difference with the kinds of meetings we have. We have people that are in our organization that are called service officers. I'm the commander. I'm the great guy, you know, the leader. He's the guy because he will take a new person coming in, say, sit down and tell me your story. Where were you when you were deployed?
Okay.
What did you do? What happened to you? How'd you get hurt? Those kinds of things. And then he will meld that into the things that the VA is willing to accept as a reason for you to get benefits from the VA.
Okay.
And I never knew anything about that.
Okay.
I spent 13 months in Vietnam, knew nothing about it, came home, heard people say, oh, benefits. I didn't pay any attention to it. Finally, our mutual friend, Jim Chancellor, said, Carnegie, did you ever go see a service officer? I said, no. He said, what is the matter with you? You were in Vietnam just like I was. Things happened to us over there. We were exposed to things you don't get in Harrison Park.
Right.
You know? And I said, well, I wasn't in a unit like that. I was, you know, with the telephone company, you know, over there. And
Yeah.
he said, I don't care you were there. And I talked to the service officer, and he said, boots on the ground in Vietnam exposed you to things you got no idea they exposed you to. And as things turned out in my life, after visiting with that service officer and being checked out by doctors and people at the VA, I had been exposed to these things. They hadn't matured in my body to a point.
Right.
But as we get older, that stuff begins to grow outwardly. And as it turned out, I've had several things that were very serious illnesses because of my exposure to Agent Orange in Vietnam. And I had no clue.
Right.
So those guys are really, really, really important.
Okay. So how do people get a hold of them? Is there a number that you guys have, a website or Facebook page?
Here,
I know you guys are on Facebook. There's a
yep,
DAV
there's a Facebook page.
Probably has all the information.
We have a chapter in Hammond.
Okay.
We have a chapter in Crown Point that they meet now in just south of Crown Point. And we have a chapter in Valparaiso.
Okay.
All three of them, you can find them in the yellow pages.
Right.
That's how old I am. But you can find them on the website at DAV of Crown Point, DAV of Hammond, DAV of Cedar Lake.
Oh, great.
And then there'll be, most of them have some type of information page that tells them when their meetings are, where they're located at, and usually the commander's phone number.
Okay.
If you want to get a hold of people here in Northwest Indiana, you can call me.
Okay.
219-629-0594. Now that rings my cell phone. It's in my pocket.
Right.
I may not be the guy, but I know who the guy is.
Who the guy is. Okay. All right. Well, what a great resource you are, and what a great advocate you are, and an ambassador for veterans. Just it amazes me because, you know, the average age of those soldiers in Vietnam were 19 years old.
Oh, yeah.
That is 4 years removed from my son's age. And he just turned 15. And I couldn't even imagine sending him to a war like that.
If you look at the statistics, particularly if you go to the wall, there's some books about the statistics and things like that. They'll tell how many 16-year-olds were killed in Vietnam.
Unbelievable.
They snuck in the service, or their parents signed for them or something.
Right.
The numbers of young kids that age that died in Vietnam is unbelievable. Now, I'm not saying thousands and thousands and thousands,
Right.
but just when you see 10 or 15,
Yeah.
that's an impact on you.
Exactly. Well, Bob, thank you for your service and thank you for your time. I always look forward to talking with you and nurturing our relationships over the years. I know we've got a lot of work ahead of us, too, as well. And, you can count me in as one of the sponsors for your next DAV walk. Hospice is very proud of the work that you do. We're very proud to participate. We took a team out there and walked this year, and it really brought my dad's legacy back here, because I remember he was always calling us, don't forget the DAV walk next weekend. It's, okay, Dad, we'll be there.
But that we appreciate that, because that's how we can do the things we do.
For sure.
So we appreciate that. And thank you, Damien. It's
thank you for all
always
your
a joy to see you and your family.
And if anybody has any questions about the Munster Chamber, we are at munsterchamber.org. 219-836-5549 is our phone number. I'm Damien Rico. I serve hospice of the Calumet area, hospicecalumet.org. 219-922-2732 is our phone number if you need any questions about hospice care or our palliative program that we're building. Anything and everything, we're a great resource for you guys, for the community. We take a lot of pride in doing that. So thank you for joining us on Chamber Chat this month here, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Teen parents face overwhelming challenges, but with the right support, they can build bright futures for themselves and their children.
Mental Health America's ETAP program provides education, mentorship, and resources to help young parents graduate.
Right now, your donation goes twice as far. Thanks to a generous match, every dollar given up to $30,000 is doubled, but only until March 31st.
Scan the QR code, visit MHANWI.org, or mail your check to ETAP Match today.
Becoming a truck driver doesn't have to be complicated. At Schneider, we make it easy to get your commercial driver's license and start your new career. With our CDL apprenticeship training, you'll get paid to become a truck driver in just 5 to 6 weeks and have a Schneider driving job waiting for you when you've completed the program. Plus, during training, Schneider will provide transportation, lodging, and meals at no cost to you. Ready to get your career on the road? Learn more and apply today at SchneiderJobs.com. That's SchneiderJobs.com.
Tech Credit Union supports the essential role of union labor in building strong communities. That's why we offer hassle-free banking, financial empowerment, and a commitment to your success. Save for the future, handle life's challenges, and trust a partner that stands by hardworking union members. Tech Credit Union, the better option for you and your money. Visit techcu.org or call 800-276-8324. Tech Credit Union, supporting union families every step of the way.
Do you want to get a vaccine, but it's difficult to get to your healthcare provider? Call the folks at Right Care Pharmacy. They'll come to your home, discuss your vaccination status with you, and administer the appropriate vaccine with expertise. They offer vaccines for flu, shingles, pneumonia, hepatitis A and B, TDAP, RSV, and COVID. They've been serving the Lake and Porter County community for over 11 years and are fluent in Spanish. Call Right Care Pharmacy at 219-655-5028.
Do you like to work with your hands, creating something from nothing? Then think about Laborers Local 41. You'll get 432 hours of apprenticeship training, all while earning a wage with benefits and incurring no student debt. You'll travel to different job sites, learn tons of skills, and in a lot of cases, be the first one on and the last one off a job site. It all starts at laborers41.com.
If you're thinking of finishing your basement, installing outdoor security cameras, or your business has plans to break ground on a new project in 2024, Powering Indiana, Lake County is your source for the region's best electricians. With IBEW, Local 697 electricians, you're choosing the highest level of safety and reliability. Visit poweringindiana.org today and ensure your project is in the hands of skilled professionals.